I've blinged a few things, like a clock and other things, and I've had to individually put crystals on it.
Yeah, I can't imagine what went through to make this.
Well, for I don't know how long this took.
It's crazy.
It's nuts.
I don't even know.
You just started matching boots.
Yes.
We will get right on
That's the next step. It really is.
Yeah, it's the next step. You gotta get hat first.
Please make that happen.
It's fine. I went upstairs and I took the other.
Hilarious.
So when that kicks in an hour, I might not fall asleep. I should keep my shit together through women's. I was like, I already played all my high school games today. This is just gonna be a shit show.
We got 5 minutes and we'll let some people
Why
come
is this
in.
5 minutes.
confusing me
Although we're
so
kind of already
much?
starting because we're chatting.
Okay.
But you know,
Not the buffalo ones for you.
It's a, what do they call it? An icebreaker?
an icebreaker?
Isn't that what people call this stuff?
No, that's what corporate people call stuff when they're
I was just
doing
intrigued by the
boring
idea
corporate
of
presentations.
Korean ones.
Ouch. This
Yeah.
is not corporate or
No,
This is
boring.
not
I'm
corporate.
sorry for
I'm sorry guys,
implying
it won't be
that.
a corporate
Like,
presentation.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
I will
kinda
not
want a
swear
little bit of
though.
both.
Yeah.
And I just feel like
Maybe I will.
I'm like, I can share.
No children.
We've all
I think there's no children.
Oh, thank you. Okay, there we go.
I try not to swear. I mean, it's.
Oh, wow.
But also I'm hungry
Can't,
right
I
now,
sometimes
so I
can't help
just
it. Do you want me to not swear on your stream?
No, you can say whatever you want. I don't care.
So,
Okay.
I'm making the rules. I'm calling the shots.
Sometimes, if
wait, are
something's
they
really,
Collins
really
rules?
hard.
'Cause I broke all of Collins' commentary rules earlier.
Did you? Did you swear?
I swore I talked over people, and then I didn't.
Did you name drop corporations?
I did not name drop.
Okay, you're fine.
I also did yell.
Chevron.
Did you hit
Shell.
that emitter?
Apple.
Okay.
I hit pull every time, Scott.
Okay, yeah, I noticed. Remember that time you were just recording something normal at my house and I had it set like,
A normal human.
yeah,
voice?
normal human setting, and then like it was just on the limiter the whole time when you were
Yeah.
talking? Why is that?
Comes from the.
I do. This is a really great laptop. I run SolidWorks on this laptop in like full 3D, and it does insane stuff.
I can tell it's the exact same model because that's the gold hinges.
It's super cool. I liked it.
It's like the Stealth 65 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. It's very powerful.
Oh,
Yeah.
bless
It works
his heart.
well.
And it has Thunderbolt 3.
Does
Bless
it?
his heart.
Yeah. Put it on the side. The middle one is
Did not know that the one right below HDMI.
Yeah, little tiny one.
Yeah.
So I
tiny one.
have
I've never used it.
40 gigs a second.
Congratulations, you have a mobile streaming laptop.
Yep.
I want one.
That's what we stream on.
That's what we stream with. That's the laptop we stream with.
You guys convinced me BTW. We were somewhere today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, streaming's
Sweet.
cool.
Super fun.
And you don't make any money.
No,
No, you don't. You don't make any money, and you also use up a lot of your time. But it's
You do
pretty
meet a lot of
rewarding.
really cool people.
You meet a lot of people. Yeah. And then
Like
these guys
leaking
streaming.
microphones or something.
Microphones in a hot tub.
I did
Well-
the Nintendo cartridge. I did look at the Nintendo cartridges.
If
It
I
tasted really
if
good.
I had a hot tub, I would totally do hot tub streams to try and like make $1 billion.
Oh yeah. And then sell the water.
Into still.
Yeah.
So
That's
jokes
the-
are
that's
jokes
the
are
target.
jokes, but there's like a
People
there's
do
like
that.
a there's a thing
People
where you
sell
can
that
derail
one.
me, and that's the selling of the water is the derailing. Yeah, there's weird
You'll get
people
some
doing
weirdo in
weird
chat who's
stuff.
like, how much water do I want?
Yeah, exactly.
You can do like indoor kiddie pool, by the way.
I can't do that because of the dogs. The dogs will jump in your thing.
You do it in the garage.
Yeah.
One of the dogs is scared of taking a bath, so I don't have to worry about that one. But the dumb one really likes.
You can do it in the garage
The dumb one likes
with,
it.
with the car in the background, showing it off.
I don't think people are not impressed by that.
What if you're like doing like engine work in the tub with the car?
No, I was
That
thinking
just
more.
sounds
Of,
unsafe.
I was thinking more of like
All kinds of
get a bunch of
audiences.
DJ equipment
Oh, there
like
you
in the hot tub.
On
And then,
floaties.
Like, just try not to get electrocuted. Yeah. And like so, it's like people will be watching because they're like, oh, this is gonna be it. There he goes. He lost his balance. Is it good? Oh, not yet. Not yet. Okay.
You can get the IRS water and it won't be conducted.
That's a good point too. Or oil.
Oil.
Yeah.
Ketchup.
Yeah, could you imagine?
A hot tub stream in ketchup.
I know, right?
I don't want to
Okay,
wait.
am I missing that?
Wait, ketchup would conduct. Ketchup conducts electricity, you guys. It has salt in
Oh,
it.
okay.
It
So
has
oil.
water and salt. Water and salt conduct electricity.
So oil.
So
just
oil,
a giant. What
Olive
type of
oil would probably be fine.
Baby oil.
Baby
You know,
oil.
like a baby oil hot tub.
Yeah. Yes.
You can change it every single
.com.
episode.
That's so.
Yeah, it's just a different
Can you
type of
imagine
oil.
Can you imagine how gross that would be?
That would be, you
Like-
would either end up with the
Like, would it
smoothest,
work?
There's
Would it
places
work?
that do
you would
that.
have the smoothest skin, or you would be covered
For
in
real though, would
pimples,
it? Would
and
that
those
actually
are your
work? If you
choices.
took a regular like commercial hot tub, filled it with baby oil, would like it would heat it up, and
The pump would probably fail.
It would
Yeah.
jam.
do you
I
think
think
the
it would
pump
kill
would
the
just
pump.
be too thick for
There's
it?
Yeah.
resistance against the
You have to
pump.
change the pump out, yeah. Transformers are filled with mineral oil.
Yeah, yeah. Just completely non-conductive, and it keeps it cool. But yeah, that's
Could be flammable though.
Well, that conversation.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That was
These are good. Sorry guys, if you don't like these conversations, I apologize.
Right together.
This is how you homebrew.
My brain. This is how you make homebrew pinball machines.
You have to be a dreamer. This is your
Your process.
what's it called? The intersection to the start.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be a dreamer. Fill my hot tub with baby oil and build a pinball machine.
And build a pinball. How did we even talk about it? What happened?
How
How did we get
We were
here?
talking about streaming.
Yeah. Oh, streaming. That's right.
Streaming hot
All
tubs.
right. Well, I guess I will get started.
Don't get electrocuted
It looks
in hot tubs.
about to be 6 o'clock-ish. So, I am going to quickly go through the slides. I do have slides in here with a bunch of information. I can post this stuff up on my website when I'm done, and I'll give you guys the link for that when we're finished here, because there are some good references in here. If you are interested in building a homebrew, or if you're just straight curious on how people do this stuff and like what I did as well. But I am going to go through this quickly because I do want to just get a lot of questions going and answer those things, because those are just most fun. And you guys can ask me anything about even stuff I'm currently doing, whatever. Nothing's off limits. If it's something I can't answer, I'll just make up something stupid to say, and you'll know that I can't answer it. But yeah, so that is that's where we'll start anyway. So those of you who do not know me, I know some of you I don't recognize, some of you I do recognize. But my name is Scott Danesi. I am a pinball machine parts engineer, which is a fancy way of saying I work at Pinball Life and I draw stuff in the computer. I guess that's kind of fancy too. Yeah, I draw stuff in the computer and I deal with manufacturers, and we make parts. So I'm sure you probably maybe have heard of Pinball Life or not, but we have a lot of just standard parts like flippers and rebuild kits and pop bumper assemblies and stuff like that, right? Just normal things. But that's what I do for a living. What's my favorite movie? Why did I write that on there? I don't know. It has no relevance to any of this stuff, but if I had to pick one, probably lately, it's probably the movie Hackers. That movie is just like, it's very, very nostalgic, and like it's like a time capsule. Like if you were to look at that thing, you watch it now, it's like, yeah, that's a time capsule of the 90s right there. But anyway, so I don't know why that's on there. I am talking to you today because you guys all want to know probably about homebrew or what I'm currently doing, or music stuff, or something that, because I'm so ADD about everything, you probably have some sort of questions for me about something. So that's why I'm here. Short answer. All right, so homebrews. Real quick though, what I want to talk about, like what homebrews actually are. Some people have a misconception about homebrews, but I just want to go through the different types. There's all sorts of different types of these, and I tried to categorize these as we go through it forward. But a homebrew pinball machine is actually just a pinball machine that doesn't exist, or a theme that doesn't exist, or it's someone who wants to build a pinball machine from scratch because there is a mechanism or something that doesn't exist and they want to see it be built, right? So in a nutshell, that is it. They usually have, this is interesting because and this is all usually, as you can tell by my slides here, because it's so vague, and this is such a broad thing by saying homebrew pinball machines. But they're usually built by non-industry people. Some industry people do still build homebrew games. People like myself, I was working for a pinball company when I built the Total Nuclear Annihilation in Whitewood. So that's kind of, it's just something, it was something fun that I did, but we can talk about that stuff later. They're usually custom theme and custom designed because things don't exist. All right, so here's the types. This is the interesting thing. When I tried to sum these all up into buckets, and I think I may have captured all of them, so you can think of different types of homebrew projects, and they'll probably fall into one of these categories, right? So the first one here is the 2.0 version of things. If you guys have heard of the Dutch pinball Brida Pinbot 2.0, that is a 2.0 recode is what I call it. That's where you don't change anything about the physical machine itself. but you change out the software completely. So it still looks like a Bride of Pinbot, but it plays a completely new set of software. Again, that one fits in there, but it's not exactly, because they did change a little bit of the hardware. So they put an LCD screen in it instead of those alphanumerics. Another one like this would be the Earthshaker Aftershock thing that I worked on. I changed a bit of that. You got a question?
Cactus Canyon continued?
Yeah, Cactus Canyon continues at 2.0. Absolutely. There's like very minor hardware changes that people did on that game. So that's probably the closest one to a 2.0 that's like a really good example. So,
What about Demolition Man?
Demolition Man on steroids?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's that's a really good one. I think the Demolition Man on steroids though, didn't he put it in a Pin 2K thing, or was that Jimmy's thing? It's something else, right? What was that one called? Demolition Man 2000. That was the one. That one's a complete. Remember that one?
Yeah,
He made Demolition Man into a Pinball 2000 cabinet. So it's a wide body with the big head on it with the monitor in it. It's like reflecting off the glass. It's insane. Yeah, so Demolition Man on steroids, you're right though, that's just a recode, right? There was no hardware changes needed besides throwing a P-Rock into it. So yeah, that's a really good one. The next group here is a retheme, including, this could include art, this does include software most of the time, but it doesn't have to. So rethemes, I've seen a bunch of these done. People do these a lot with EMs, because you can get EMs really cheap. And you can just basically strip those things down to the wood, repaint them all into the theme that you love so much that you could take it and rip it down, repaint all the hackers people on there with some cool like movie scenes on it, and just reassemble it and say, all right, that's my homebrew, and that's great. There's also replica, remake, recreation machines. I've seen this a few times. This is a good example is what CGC is doing right now. Another example of this, which you may not have heard of, is a buddy of mine named Jimmy has created something called Wizard Blocks, which is the Pin 2000 game that never got made. He went out and just started collecting all the information he could on it and built his own so that one could exist for like in its full. I believe that project's done now. I think he's got as far as he could with it with what he could find. So stuff like that, that's cool. Emulated games. This is a really cool one. I put asterisk by this and I don't remember why, but it'll probably make sense when we start talking about it. But these emulated games are usually built completely in, they could be like virtual machines or like virtual cabinets that you guys have seen with just the TV screen in them. They could also be something like a buddy of mine built called a multi-bingo, which is cool because it plays multiple bingo machines. He just has a bingo playfield and a monitor in the back, and you can switch between all these different bingo games. I have a picture of it coming up later, which I'll show you, which it's really interesting. I qualify that as an emulated because he rewrote the bingo software exactly the way it was, and it put those in the machine. So pretty fun. And then and then the bottom one, which is in red, obviously is fully custom. I'm going to talk a lot about this today because fully custom covers so much more of what what you need to know in building a homebrew because it consists of everything. It's and you'll see why in a second. All right, so the 2.0s, we talked about this. I've gone through all of this, but let's see if I've missed anything. Recodes are using original programming language. 2.0 stuff has new hardware, rewritten software, and sometimes they flip back and forth. That's a picture of the Earthshaker Aftershock that I did. When did I build that? 2015 maybe? I forgot. But the back box is, I took the back glass out because I wanted people to see the actual P-Rock system that's in there. That is not, those boards are not usually what you would see in a System 11 game. The top right is the actual stock power supply, and there is an interface board in there, but the top left has a PC, and there's a P-Rock below that, and then next to that is a custom driver board which interfaces that P-Rock to the System 11 hardware. These P-Rocks weren't originally meant to be just dropped into a System 11 cabinet. So, all right. So the retheme, including the art. Here's a really good example. This is Hot Rod. This used to be an EM that was, I think it was called Mustang. And someone could fact check that on me, but it used to be called Mustang, and my buddy took it and redid all of the art on it. This particular case, though, he did reprogram it, though, and he put a solid state hardware into it so that he could do different things with the lights. But really, it's a re-theme of something that already existed, a physical playfield. He did not change anything on the playfield besides that art. Cool, and the replica. Okay, so here's a picture of the wizard blocks. This is pretty much done. I mean, if you look at this thing, it looks great. It looks like a finished pinball machine. Yeah, this is really cool, and we're seeing more people start digging into this. I know there's a Pinball 2000 game, the Playboy game, that was never built. That I'm pretty sure someone was trying to dig into that and figure out if they could find enough information about that to build it. But it gets real hard after that because Wizard Blocks was actually before that one, and that one wasn't finished at all. So it's like you get more and more obscure as you go more forward with it. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes they use the original or recreated assets if they can find them for these recreations. I know CGC with the Medieval Madness and the Attack from Mars, those are using the original code. So it's an emulated version of that original code. Yeah, they have a lot of aftermarket custom parts as well. All right, emulator. So here's the thing I was talking about. This is that multi-bingo game. This one is just very impressive. I don't know how many people have played a bingo or are familiar with like a bingo pinball machine. Okay, so there's a good handful, but it's interesting because it is a pinball machine. It has pinballs in it, and you nudge. It does not have flippers, but the goal of them is different based on whatever game you're playing. So what's neat with this is that the playfields are mostly the same on these. They're very, very similar. So we built a playfield that was pretty generic, and then he can then flip through on that LCD the different types of games and just go through them and play them all, which is really fun. I reported programming on this only because Nick actually didn't port anything on this multi-bingo, but some people do that with like the ROMs that you can get. Like I know those ones with the virtual ones. You can put the original ROMs that you can download off Internet Pinball Database into those and actually run the code from those. But yeah, Nick actually created all that again from scratch. He's a crazy guy. All right, and then the fully custom, right? As I said before, new playfield, new theme, new art, new rules and programming, and they're usually, this is the case, this is when you see just crazy innovation in pinball machines because these people have, they have just no rules. They can make whatever they want as long as it functions. They're building it, so they're doing just crazy stuff. This is Matt here on the right. He is the designer of this game. The artist, which I forgot his name unfortunately, on the left side, did all the art for this Doom game. But Doom didn't exist as a pinball machine, and Matt really wanted to see it. So he wanted to see it so much that he was willing to dump a bunch of time and money into building one from scratch. So that's fully custom. I believe the only thing that he reused was parts of the cabinet. I think the head was redone as well. Everything else was just done by hand. All the wire forms, the plastics, everything. So it's just neat to see this kind of stuff. And this is the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about today because it's the most interesting. All right, so why building a homebrew? Well, it's probably redundant for me to go through this again, but really it's the majority of it's just, it's a big creative outlet for some people. A lot of people have all of these ideas and they want to just get this out, share them with others, and be challenged at the same time. They want this, like, they want to see something that no one else is going to build. So something in their brains. Oh, it's also fun. I don't know if I mentioned that. Building homebrews is fun. Okay, cool. So let's talk about realistic expectations. On the right here, first of all, you will see, I don't know if how many of you guys know what Jack Danger is, probably most. But he built a foam core mock-up whitewood here, this was an early photo of something he was working on. I wanted to talk a little bit, I wanted this not to be negative. I hope this doesn't sound negative. But making a homebrew game is expensive. It's very time consuming. But it's really rewarding when you build something and you put it together the first time and you power the flippers up and you're able to throw a pinball onto the playfield and actually flip at it and see the pinball hit the things that you've designed or the different geometry that you've put together. It's crazy. Building a homebrew pinball machine will also really push you to learn new skills, right? There's a lot of things involved here, including mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering, rules design, art direction, all sorts of crazy things that you'll have to learn how to deal with or have someone help you with. So it's fun. Don't think this is negative though. Just reiterating. Okay, so high level design tasks, right? We've got to start thinking about things. And these are sort of in a particular order. I wanted to make sure to call out the really important stuff first, the things that you'll need to get out of the way first before you can actually start doing this. So the first thing needs to be addressed is the cabinet, and then you're gonna have to work on the playfield. You're gonna have to put together the electrical and power system. After that, you're gonna have to worry about putting a PC in this and how that's going to interact with the electrical power system that you have in there. You'll need to then do audio and then art and animations. This is the way I personally recommend doing this. I know there's a lot of people out there, like John Papaduke, for instance. I'll use him as an example. He likes to push art way up further, like almost right, like even with playfield design. I don't recommend doing that because things change a lot when you're building homebrews. You're going to be drilling holes in the playfield where you had to move something, and if you've done your art already, you're drilling through your art, and you're going to need to redo it all. So, not a very good thing. So this is the way I would actually do that. This is a picture right here of the really, really early version of Ghost in the Shell by Ed Owens. I don't know if you guys have seen this machine at all, but it was at Expo this year. It's much further along than that. This is actually in here almost to be funny because of how early it was. But yeah, that game actually is turning out really nice. Okay, so cabinet stuff. Well, you need to figure out first if you want to do a wide body or a narrow body. The reason for picking one of these is that you want to try to use as many standard parts as possible. I'm probably going to repeat that sentence a million times going forward, and I apologize for it. But there are tons of ways to do this. You can fully custom build one. You can use a WPC or a Stern or any kind of classic Bally, which is what I used for the TNA Whitewood. I had a Dolly Parton cabinet that I used to put that in. You can also just build them yourself, or you can outsource it. I recommend finding a really junk game that needs to be retired and pull as many parts out of that thing as possible. Use the cabinet, maybe just re-bondo the cabinet, make it look nice again, and just paint it black for now. Just make it look sort of presentable, so when you bring this thing around in its half-finished state, it still looks okay. That's probably what I would do. Any of these will work though, like the WPC Stern, Classic Bally, and whatever else.
Would you recommend doing your cabinet before you start on the playfield, or
Yes.
does it matter? Okay.
It matters big time. And the reason it matters is because the Bally cabinets are shorter than the WPC cabinets. The narrow body versus wide body is going to dictate how wide or narrow your playfield is.
Sure.
The Sterns are also a bit different in depth, so you'll just need to just get the cabinet out of the way, make that decision first, and then move on. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to fit a cabinet to this playfield size that you had in your head, and it's just going to be a nightmare. But very good question. All right, so playfield design stages. So the first thing that I would do is make sure that you decide on what you want to do as a theme. You can just say, I want an unlicensed theme, but if you say that in your head, you need to come up with what kind of license that is or what kind of story it is ahead of time, because that will also tell you what you need to put on that playfield. You can't just, I mean, you could just make something that looks like a Bally with 1, 2, 3 targets all over it, and then just come up with a theme and kind of slap something to it later. You could do that. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not as fun. It's more fun to actually build things around it. So obviously start with pencil and paper. This is where I struggle a little bit. I do not do this. And the reason I don't always do this, and I didn't in the past, I am trying to do it now. But in the past, I would just go right into SolidWorks, which I am pretty proficient at. I would go in the computer and start doing stuff, and realizing that I'm wasting way too much time trying to get some lines to look right when I could have just had a piece of paper in front of me and just drew the line and get the ideas out. You need to get them out of your head and onto the paper quickly, otherwise you're gonna forget things and get frustrated and start losing track of what you're doing. So pencil and paper is the best way to do this. Here's an example from Matt Benzik. This is his Crazy Taxi game right here. You can see how he drew it all out in paper. It doesn't have to be to scale. It doesn't have to be super accurate. You just need to get your ideas down so you can see kind of what your playfield is going to look like. And this is, surprisingly, this is great. This actually looks a lot like his game. I don't know if you've seen that taxi game. It's did he rename that game actually?
Yeah.
Was it
Motor City.
Motor City. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So that's early on. So he also wrote down his story as well about what exactly is going to be happening, just so it's all documented and he can add or subtract from it later, which is really cool. After all that's done, I would start doing an initial mock-up. I still, at this point, probably wouldn't put it in the computer yet. You probably should just get a piece of plywood, get it mounted into your game, and start drawing on that and drilling some holes in there, gluing some things with hot glue, and just seeing how everything works with the actual sizing that you're dealing with. Yeah, just use whatever. I mean, the Rick and Morty whitewood had blue tape all over it. I was using blue tape as ball guides. I would just like fold it up over some paper and like stick it in there, and I'm like, okay, that kind of works. That's looking all right, you know. And from there, after all of that is done, you can take it and start translating that into the computer at that point.
Is there any good way of making good wireforms? A lot of times when I see homebrew, is like they just don't flow well because they don't have good wireforms.
Yeah, correct. So that's a big challenge actually. A lot of people don't have really good welding skills when it comes to wireforms because you need to have a tack welder and you need to do it just right so you don't burn all the way through it. And you need to also have, you're used to seeing wireforms in pinball machines that are done by a CNC machine. So they're CNC wire benders, so they're exactly the same every time, and those curves that are on everything are exactly to the drawing in the computer. You'll never see that with homebrew. Even people that are super good at making wireforms, you can still kind of tell that it's bent over a pipe or something, you know. But nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's how you have to do it. But once you get that smoothed out, you can just make iterations of that wireform when you have time, and get it to flow smoother. You can say, okay, this area here I kind of screwed up. Let me try and rebuild this and smooth it out.
So there's third-party companies you can send those.
There are third-party companies you can use, but they're so damn expensive that I would not do that.
One thing I have seen people do is they'll use like a laser cutter, like your local hackerspace, makerspace, but even if you get literally, instead of doing like the half ring wires, you can do basically flat clips that it lays into place on, and you can just do clip. I think, being what they are, but Homepin, I think, did a couple.
Well, Homepin's ramps were interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen Thunderbirds at all, but it's really interesting what they did. They cut all the wireforms out of flat steel.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they put them all together, and like they're just like square. They're square tubes, and they're all welded together. It still was done in the machine, so the bends are real smooth and correct. But it's interesting. It was a cost-saving thing, I believe.
But you could also, like, you can do that on masonite. You can also do just masonite bend forms, where basically, once you get it worked out, you can just cut your template out of masonite and just make sure your wire matches to that template, and then just match it. And then you can just clip as you need it so it doesn't spread apart on you.
Some people, when they're restoring pins, they make vacuum forms of ramps. Do you run to that with homebrews too, or?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Yeah, big time. So there's a guy named Josh Kugler that actually was doing vacuum forming. He had a small vacuum form machine that he built. You can go online and just look up like how to build a DIY vacuum form, and they're pretty basic. You just hook a shop vac to this thing. It's got like a infrared lamp above it, and you 3D print yourself a if you have access to 3D print, or you just take some foam and like shave it yourself with a file. Put it down there, heat up the plastic, which is PETG, by the way. That's the best type of plastic to use for vacuum forming. And then you suck that thing down with the shop vac, and it will form it, and then you cut it all out. So yeah, people are doing it. They're not doing it like on huge ramps, because like really big 4x4 vacuum forming machines cost a lot of money. But you can outsource those certain things to people that maybe do have that. it just really, it depends on what you want to do. For me, I would choose, if I was building another game with ramps that needed to be vacuum formed, I would probably look into see if I could make them out of metal instead. Because you can you can draw this metal ramp in SolidWorks or something, flatten it out, and send that off to a metal fab shop, and they'll laser cut it for you, and you can bring it back and you can just bend it up yourself and it'll look really nice. And then you use like metal wire forms, because the metal wire forms are going to be easier for you to just kind of mock in place, and then you can replace later. Hopefully that answers the question.
Another question.
Yeah?
Do you recommend like mocking things up in the computer, trying to play it on the computer first?
No,
No?
I don't. And so a lot of people will
Because I think
recommend
I
the
saw
opposite.
CERN, like does that.
A lot of people recommend the opposite.
Yeah.
For home brewers, if you want to just do that just for fun, then great, you know. But it really helps to just put the play field down. In my eyes, it just put the play field in that cabinet that you decided. Start drawing on some stuff, and you can get a really good visualization just by looking at it, because we've all looked at so many pinball machines. We know, you can tell by looking at things if angles are going to work or not, and when you see it like in real life, it really does. It's just more advantageous, I think. Yeah, it's just a better use of time, I think. Yeah. So, but people will argue with me on that. So don't get other opinions. Yeah.
How come this is kind of? Are you gonna talk about mechanisms later or?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about all that stuff. I'll go through and give you my thoughts on mechanisms as well. But yeah, well, we can answer questions too. I've got all sorts of ridiculous stuff. Again, this is very high level stuff here, and I want to trigger questions for you guys. If you have questions about that now, you can ask. We're continuing on the list on here, right? We got to CAD, we got the first whitewood, and then you start iterating, because you're gonna totally destroy your first whitewood by drilling holes and moving things around. So you're gonna want to take it off, get another one, iterate again, make the major changes, and then decide when you're finally done. You'll want to decide that you're finished and get that into the computer and start getting that cut by an actual CNC machine. CNC playfield cutting can be done by a number of places. You can find a friend that has a CNC machine. You can go to a makerspace. They have a lot of different tools like that. And they're very willing to help you do something, and they'll be very excited that you're cutting a pinball playfield. So there'll be people wanting to help you if you don't know what you're doing. But I do all mine DIY. I do have a small CNC machine in my garage. It's only 31 inches by 31 inches, so it can't cut a full playfield in one shot. And there's articles on my website as well that show how I actually do that. I create a slide mechanism, so I cut like the bottom half first, and then I slide the whole playfield, realign everything, and make sure it's square, and then hit go on the top side, and it cuts the top side in there. Because I don't have the room or want to spend the money on a huge, 4-foot thing. Right?
Not allowed.
Yeah, that's my wife, by the way.
There's
She's watching
limits.
everything I'm saying.
There's limits.
Okay, cool. So the electrical system, this is really important. You need to decide on an electrical system. There are a lot of options. There did not used to be a lot of options, but there are now. The number one option, the most popular option for homebrewers is the Multimorphic P3 system. That system has a lot of support. It has a lot of community around it as well. There's a lot of development currently going on with this system. There's also the FAST system. This is just a smaller community of people, but it's basically the same as the P3 system. It's a modular system. You buy just the parts that you need. There's something called OPP. It's still a thing. It was an open source pinball platform, I believe is what it stood for. There were some issues with just people who wanted to go the cheap route. This is a very cheap way to do it because you're building the boards yourself, putting the through-hole components in it. But you need some sort of, you need some more experience in electrical engineering to start using some of this, because when you encounter problems, you need to try and figure out what's happening, and there's not a lot of support for it, unfortunately. And then some people actually use Arduinos and build their own custom drivers, which is not bad, but I think is way too time consuming. Me personally, I like the path of least resistance. I would rather pay a little extra, get a P3 platform put into my game. So if something goes wrong, I can reach out to the community and say, like, any of you guys seen this happen before? And someone will probably chime in and give me a hand with it. Lights and LEDs is also another thing you got to think about. This is the TNA whitewood, by the way. This is the bottom side. You can see that how much stuff is just jammed underneath it. I tried to keep the wiring clean by putting little wraps around things, but every single LED in that game is direct drive. And what I mean by that is that it's not serial controlled at all. There are 4 wires going from the P-Rock boards to each individual LED. So there's a lot, if you can just think of the spider web that has to happen to make that happen. I chose to go this route because it's the 100% most reliable and easily serviced route. If I have an LED that dies in this thing, the system doesn't care. The one LED dies completely. It's just out. Everything else functions. It doesn't take out any other LEDs with it. In a serial situation, you could take out a whole string of LEDs and you try and figure out what's going on. It's like the Christmas lights thing. You know, if one bulb's burned out somewhere, you got to figure out where it is. I did this because I just wanted it to be very reliable and I wanted to not have to worry about it ever again. But it's a little more expensive and it makes a wiring nightmare. So that's kind of what that looks like.
Halloween had cereal and it lost 2/3 of its lights.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to do that. So there's that. The switches are really easy. That's just off-the-shelf components. Switches are just direct drive as well. I did not use something called a matrix on here. The switches just go directly to one of the P3 boards. Coils and drives are also direct. Those go right to those boards as well. Those boards are not in this picture because I did all the high voltage boards in the back box, just as normal pinball machines do. I try to keep those things off the bottom side of the playfield because they have through-hole transistors mounted on them, and excessive vibration on those can break the solder joints because transistors are a little bit heavier than most components. So my recommendation would be to keep those high voltage things in the back box. And the power systems, you're going to need 3 voltages to run a pinball machine. You'll need a 5, 12, and a 48. Those are very common. I wouldn't recommend going any higher than a 48. It's not necessary. The 48 works fine, but you'll definitely need a 5 and 12. So some games, people want to use like a 24 volt system for flashers. That's how like Williams used to use those back in the day. But not necessary. The LEDs that we have today that go into flasher sockets run on 12 volts. They're perfectly happy at that voltage, so you can go ahead and just run those. All right, then we get into the PC operating system stuff. The PC recommendations, right? So I would recommend, honestly, just using a desktop PC. In the TNA Whitewood, I had an ATX motherboard and power supply just in the back box. Always run a separate power supply to your computer than you're using for the rest of the machine. Keeps the noise down. It keeps any kind of spikes and dips in the voltages won't affect the computer. Because the computer restarts, that whole game's going down for a moment while that computer comes back up. So definitely do that.
This is an addition to the P3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll need an actual computer to tell the P3 what to do. So the P3 is just an interface. It's a USB interface between the computer and the physical hardware of the machine. But you'll need an actual PC to do that. Yeah.
How much actual I/O do you need off of the PC itself?
Oh, it's not much. I don't know the exact things. It's a good question for Jerry from Multimorphic.
So you'd probably be able to get away with like a little ITX motherboard? Just so you don't have
yeah, probably. I would recommend, your limitations are going to come in, not CPU. The RAM is going to be a problem. And also your video processing is going to be a thing you're going to need to think about. You'll want as much video processing as you can if you're going to run an LCD. If you're just running alphanumeric or something like that, you don't really need a lot of videos. So don't worry about it, but RAM is a big one.
How much RAM?
I went from 4 gigabytes in TNA to 8 gigabytes because I started running out of room for videos.
So 16
and
to
stuff.
32 gig.
Oh yeah, you'll be fine with that.
Okay.
What's all the RAM being taken off?
Video stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, so what I do is I try to make the machine boot faster by removing some of that stuff and running that off the disk.
Yeah.
But if you slow it down, bring it into RAM, you can actually trigger those videos and stuff way faster on the screen, and like you can do multiple things at once if it's pulling from RAM. So it's just incredibly fast.
And when you were running Rick and Morty, like what level of video card were you having on that?
The Rick and Morty game, what were we running? There's a lot of different PCs that went into Rick and Morty, unfortunately. I don't remember exactly what the specs were.
But
I
like
can look that up though.
Like say like a 2060 or 2070?
Nothing like that. No,
Not-
it was onboard Intel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So like you could get away with like an AMD, like.
Oh yeah, if you put a video card in, you're gonna have way more
Okay.
than you need.
But
Yeah,
like
I'm talking like people who try and condense this stuff down. We're running onboard video for TNA and Rick and Morty.
Okay.
It's all, and they're both Intel systems.
So like a Ryzen, like one of their APU units would work just fine.
It
for that.
probably will work. If I were building a homebrew just for myself,
Right.
just throw computer equipment's so cheap. Well, it used to be cheap with
Right.
the Bitcoin video card thing, but it's relatively cheap to throw in just overkill in it, so you don't have to worry about it. If you're making tons of these and want to save money, then you can start backing it down and seeing where your limits are. It really does depend on like how much you're pushing it. So I know people are running like small LCDs at a low resolution. It's fine. But if you're running a giant like JJP like 4K screen, you're gonna have to rethink what you're doing with the hardware.
Has anyone ever successfully run anything off of like a Pi?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Earthshaker runs off a Pi. Legends of Valhalla runs off a Pi.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Would
So
you
it's a Pi
recommend
4.
that?
Huh?
Would you recommend that for
No.
something? Oh, no.
No. I would not recommend running off a Raspberry Pi because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to squeeze that sponge and get enough out of it for it to function. That's why I recommend just overkilling the PC at first. Like, just get your game made, and then you can start backing things down. With the Earthshaker project, I had a desktop PC in there that was like, it's called a shuttle PC. Do you remember those? Like,
Yeah.
I had one of those in there because it was very powerful. It had like 16 gigs of RAM, which I didn't even come close to using on that game. There's no video. I did that, and then I was able to like squish it down to a Pi so I could get it to boot really fast because I was running Windows, and I put a sad face next to Windows because it's not the most stable in a pinball machine. I am a Windows developer, so just to throw that out there, like I'm not biased by any means. I'm probably biased toward Windows if anything, but so you'll just throw a big PC in there and worry about it later. That's it. I do recommend using Linux though. Linux is a really good option for pinball machines because you can get it so that it's non-volatile, which means you can just power it off without hurting anything. And powers up that you can get the startup times down really fast. You can strip out all the wireless stuff if you're not using that and make it even quicker. There's a thing called Pinix out there. I don't know if it's still open source, but there is a distribution of Linux called Pinix made directly for people running something called Skeleton Game. I believe you could probably run NPF on it as well, but it's for pinball machines. Yeah, and it boots quick. It can be, you can just kill the power to it. It doesn't care, that kind of stuff. So now there's programming frameworks. All of these that I'm going to talk about are all written in Python, although with the P3 Multimorphic System, you can run any programming language that you want. There are hooks for like Visual Studio, C, all sorts of stuff. But Python is the easiest and like path of least resistance. I do recommend using something called Skeleton Game. You can go to skeletongame.com. There's just a ton of information about it. It basically allows you to install this thing on, it has installers for Linux, it has installers for Windows. You can just install it, plug your game into it, set your maps up for which coils fire which pieces of the pinball machine, and you can hit start and it'll actually play a 3-ball game. It's crazy. Yeah, so you do have to know a bit of programming to use Skeleton Game, so you'll have to dig into the Python to like make it do different things. But it's there, it looks real nice. That's what Python looks like in just one of the editors there. But there's a lot of documentation on that. It was written by Michael Ocean, who is a very, very talented guy. There's MPF as well. MPF is a programming language, sort of. It's like Skeleton Game. It's a branch of both Skeleton Game and MPF are a branch of something called Pyrock Game, which was what the Multimorphic team created for people to use to build games. they just tried to make it more simple for people to get started. MPF is mostly config based, so you can have you run all these configurations and you say, okay, make a light blink over here when XYZ happens. It then does that for you, which is it's pretty cool, but I don't recommend going that route because it doesn't really teach you how to program. It does not really, you can't really go outside the box too much with it because you'll have to dig in and rip it apart and redo code anyway. You might as well just start with something like Skeleton Game or Hyperec Game if you're brave enough there. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Audio. Yeah, big question.
Why does it seem like such a struggle even for commercial companies to write good code?
That's a loaded question. I'll tell you.
But it's like from an industrial point of view, this isn't that complicated. But it seems like somewhere it got complicated, and I never understand that.
Yeah, it is. I'll tell you what. Like when I first started coding, doing code for pinball machines, it was tough because a pinball machine has a lot of random stuff happening in it. And it's always happening. Like, and you have to account for all the random crap so that your stuff doesn't crash. So that it's difficult, but you can you'll get the hang of it, and you'll start figuring out how things are happening and dealing with all these these race conditions and stuff. It's pretty crazy. As for like why people struggle with pinball code, it's because I think currently people are rushing games out the door. They're not giving maybe enough time to it. It didn't used to happen in the Williams days because you really couldn't update code very easily. That game had to be done like before they shipped it because they didn't want to have to pay to send chips out to people or have to have their users burn stuff. You know, it did happen when there were major issues, but they wanted to minimize that. But now we have the option. It's so easy for us to just stick a USB into something or hook up to the Wi-Fi and update something. You know, so hopefully that kind of explains it. So audio. So audio is a cool thing. For me, I do all the audio myself, but there are tons of resources online that you can use. There's something called royalty-free music. It's and also sound effects. There's sound effect libraries that you can purchase. The issue with these things, and the only thing to watch out for, is licensing and something called attribution, which is attribution's really it's a good thing for homebrewers because all you have to do is give them credit and say thank you for the audio. This person, here's their website. It's really nice to be able to do that. But if you want to create your own stuff, there's tools online that you can type in. You can say, hey, I want to create sound effects, like, you know, free sound effect generator or something like that, and you can go and do that yourself, which is fun. So, but just be careful with this though. If you ever have a machine that you build and it goes to production, it's almost all of that's going to have to get stripped out. You can't do attribution stuff for production and commercial purposes. Stuff changes a lot when it goes to production. Animations. There's a few DIY things that you can mess with. I have messed with Sony Movie Studio and something called Synfig. Synfig is like something that allows you to move shapes around on the screen and do something like that. I use that like, you know, just for doing like stupid things in TNA. Actually, I pulled all that once TNA went to production. We had David Van Ness to redo all the animations because mine were terrible. But that's why I say hire an artist. The artists are way better at this stuff than us. So yeah, that's it. I think this is going to be pretty close. Okay, cool. Now you guys, we can talk about stuff. Question?
Start to finish, what
Yes.
kind of timeline are we?
It depends on how motivated you are. I can talk about myself. I can give you timelines. So I started with the concept for Total Nuclear Annihilation in November of 2015. And then I worked a goal and I said, this has to be at Expo 2016 in a playable state. And that was before I had anything done at all. I just said, here's my concept, it's in my brain. I have less than a year to put it together. That was a very, very accelerated timeline. But people work on these machines for 8 years. I mean, I've seen, I mean, the guy's still working on the Doom machine. He started that Doom machine about the same time I did, or if not before it.
Polynesia was 4 years for me before I got it.
And plus, you'll keep tweaking it too. Like that's the part about homebrew. It's fun. I mean, you'll keep adding to it. You'll keep saying like, "Hey, that wire form sucks. Let me pull it out." Wait, it's better if I route it this way instead. You know, like stuff like that. And you're constantly playing with it because it's fun and it's like it's a mental exercise. So yeah, it does vary a lot. Yeah, because it's not really an end goal, you know. Unless you want to make a game and then sell it to Stern or something, there's no that would be an end goal, but that's most likely not going to happen. Yeah, question.
Design questions, just like
Yeah.
shots when you're laying it out.
Mhm.
Is there any rule of thumb, or basically you just play it whatever, but just general when you're doing design, like tight shot is roughly 1.25 inches wide, medium? Is there any
No,
kind
don't go
of?
1.25 inches. That's way too tight.
I know, but I mean that's
Yeah,
what
keep
you
it
have
above
an
that.
idea.
1.5 inches would be the tightest I would ever go in anything.
Mhm.
But also, the main rule of thumb that I go by, I'm giving away secrets here, you guys ready for this? Is that you have no more than 7 shots from the lower flippers. Okay, so if you start jamming more than 7 major shots in there, it's going to start becoming very compact.
Houdini.
Everything starts jamming up and it becomes less fun. Something with Rick and Morty, I pushed that. If you guys are familiar with the Rick and Morty layout at all, I don't have a picture of it, but the shots are pretty jam-packed. I tried to get a lot in there, and it does make the game harder to shoot. So, yeah, but don't go smaller than 1.5 inches
Yeah,
on
I
shots. Like, yeah. Because remember, pinball is only an inch, like 1.062.
Right.
That's like, it's tiny. Yeah.
What kind of resources do you have for help, like from the community, websites?
Oh yeah, so there's a ton of these things. So the main one is there's a PinDev Slack resource, which is, I don't know if you guys use Slack or not. It's kind of like Discord, or it's just like a chat program, but there's a ton of people in these communities just helping people out. It's called PinDev. I should probably put that in here as like a resource. It's a good idea. But I'll post a bunch of this on my website as well, which is just scottdanesi.com. You can go, I'll put this presentation up here along with my silly picture. I'm really bad at taking selfies, but that's my CNC machine, if you guys do. That's the thing, there's like guides on the side. You see that on the left side, there's like vertical pieces of wood that keeps it so I can slide it and then cut the top side.
What brand is that?
That is an Inventables X-Carve.
Do you like it?
I do like it because it was inexpensive and I built it myself. I don't know if I would build it again. I'm of the, maybe I'm just getting old or something, but like, I bought a 3D printer back in the day when 3D printers were like just coming out, and I bought a kit, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna learn all about like how it works. Like 14 hours into this build, and I'm just like, I'm so sick of this thing. Like, I don't even want to look at it anymore. You can learn everything you need to know about a 3D printer or a CNC machine if you buy a fully assembled one and just start using it and maintaining it. So it just depends how much time you guys want to use on that stuff. But
In terms of support, just like I know Mission Pinball,
Mhm.
they have Google groups and they're always
Yeah.
for that. So like I'm getting like evening group, like here's what happened today kind of thing. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah, Mission Pinball is that's MPF
Yeah.
that I was talking about earlier. That community is pretty large. There's a lot of people in there. The reason people go with MPF is because they don't want to learn to program really. They want to just touch on it and they just want their machine to function. I don't know if I would really recommend it, but it's a good resource for people.
right,
that
just
want to
as an
that.
example.
Yeah. Question?
What is the part of the process that makes you trudge the most? Like, what is the one?
What's the worst part?
Yeah. What's the worst
Okay, so
part?
it's gonna
What is the
vary.
part
It's
you
gonna
like?
vary for different people, but I'll tell you, for me, I really didn't like doing the software. Like the software for me, just because it's a full-time job. There is so much time that goes into the software, and let's say you're working on the thing for like 4 hours, right? It barely makes a difference in what you're doing. So you're like, it feels like you're just not getting there. But you just have to stick with it and keep going, and just know that it's going to be fun and the end result will be good. You have a question?
I do. I told you I was gonna have a dumb question for you.
Dumb
Get on
question.
with it.
Okay.
If you had to lose a finger making a pinball machine, which finger would you lose and how would you lose it?
That's pretty good. Well, I have had some CNC issues, and by that I mean one time I almost started my house on fire because I ran the bit into something I shouldn't have, and I wasn't watching it. Always watch your equipment while it's running. Hey, no, that's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's Yeah, my wife's back there. She's, I don't know if she knows the story, but I was cutting something. I was cutting something for a friend actually, and it was, what happened was it hit something. I was running the bit too quickly, and it did something called skipping a step. And what it does when that happens with stepper motors is the stepper motors lose track of where they're at. And because they kind of lock up, they're pushing really hard, and then they click and they lose track, and now they don't know where they are. So like when it tries to move over and then go where it thought it was, where it's already been cutting, it tries to just dig down super deep and then run full speed like through solid plywood. That causes a lot of heat, a lot of sawdust, and a lot of heat plus a lot of sawdust is not a good combination. But so just always watch that. But yeah, it would be a CNC machine, and it would probably be a carbide bit exploding into my pinky finger.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Yeah, always
Fantastic
wear
answer.
safety glasses around carbide bits running like 10,000 RPM or more. Those things explode.
Or, just in general, wear safety glasses.
You should wear safety glasses a lot. Yeah, we used to make people wear safety glasses in my garage when I was cutting stuff, and everyone made fun of me for it. But I'm like, dude, you guys are gonna really like if something happens in here. I'm like, I don't want that on me. Martin, you have a question?
Yeah. It seems like loads of people who are coming into the pinball industry now are coming in through the homebrew market or homebrew method. Would you recommend that people who are developing homebrew games think a lot more about how their games can be produced in a mass market rather than just one-offs?
Yeah, I mean, so the best way for me anyway, if you want to get a game made by someone like American Pinball or Spooky or any of those guys, first of all, Stern probably won't make something that you build. You could use a game that you built as a resume with someone like Stern or JJP, but they won't be building the thing that you made. The smaller companies, though, do have the ability to do that. It's very, very difficult to do that, but to give yourself the best chances of this, I would use a Multimorphic P3 system because they're all familiar with that platform. I would use as many off-the-shelf components as possible with the least amount of custom manufacturing and custom machining as possible. And then don't use any source material that is copyrighted, right? So the thing is, like, if you make a game like my buddy did with the Sonic the Hedgehog on it, you need to, that's actually a little bit of a deterrent, because if you wanted to make that game, you need to go after the license and pay a lot more money to try and get that brought in, and get that okayed, and that goes through a whole bunch of different approval processes. And if the thing's already completely made, it's a nightmare. They're like, let's say they're like, oh, we don't like all those shots, like that looks weird, you have to change it, and the art's already done, the play field's already done, the electronics are already done.
But it's still possible to change because you had Elwin have Archer.
Exactly. So Elwin's Archer game is a really good example. Yeah. So Stern let him. I mean, that was a complete redesign, just so you know.
Yeah.
They allowed Keith to take his layout and apply that in the Stern environment and make a Stern machine based on his layout of Archer, which is really cool. But he used Archer as a resume, right, to get hired on Stern as a designer. The advice I would give people that really want to get into the pinball industry is to get in at some lower level job at a pinball company, whether it's a pinball parts company or it's a pinball manufacturing company or anything like that. Do something like purchasing or something. Not that I'm saying purchasing is easy, that's a damn hard thing to do, but it's something to just get your foot in the door if that's something you're good at. If you're good at running machines in a machine shop, get in there to JJP and say, I can run a machine shop. Are you guys hiring for machine shop positions? And then start working your way up from inside. That's the best way to do it. There are some outliers like Keith Elwin that used a homebrew as a resume to get here.
Somebody wanted to compete in American Pinball's homebrew contest.
Oh my God. You're really gonna
Which means they have to make a machine within a year is the parameter. What is something they should be working on first that's going to take the longest if they only have that year time frame? Like, what should they prioritize most if it might take something out of step?
Yeah, that's tough. So the American Pinball thing, from how I understand it, is American Pinball wants to have people design homebrew games and then pitch those games to them in terms of, or in, with the option of them potentially making them or something like that. That's very difficult. I'm a little skeptical on the whole process because this community, which I have been a part of and I've helped develop from very, very early on, is very open and very helpful with each other. And if the homebrew community is something that I don't know if they were totally thinking about when they said this, but if the homebrew community starts shutting themselves off and working on their things and not sharing and not helping others anymore, it will hurt the community itself. But if you wanted to make an accelerated timeline pinball machine, I would scrap the art. I would make a generic theme, and I would focus on just getting the playfield down, getting the mechanics down, getting it in a proper cabinet, obviously, and then get the software working to the point where it shows off all the mechanisms of the game so that it functions.
One more question.
Yeah.
A little personal question.
Sure.
Are you or would you like to make another homebrew just for yourself?
I would love to make another homebrew. It's so fun and it's so rewarding. When you bring your homebrew game to a show and there's a line of 3 people on it, and you're like, that's awesome. Like that, and they're smiling and playing. If you can make someone play your homebrew and make them smile and make them have fun, or make them play dollar games with their friends on it, you have succeeded in my eyes completely. Whether or not the thing has art on it or not.
Thank you, because you did exactly that for me when you were playing Polynesia at TPF a couple years ago.
Awesome. Pardon?
Do you think the bar has now been raised so high for homebrew that it's very difficult for anyone to get in at base level and just produce something which is, a work in progress without getting ripped to pieces already?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the bar is being set really high in the homebrew community at the moment. That's why I really want people to focus on building homebrew games for themselves and for them to share with the community and for them to use, so we can all enjoy it together, right? If that sort of makes sense. I mean, going in and building a homebrew with the idea of like, I'm gonna get this made, I have to do that, it's not gonna really bring out the best of what you can do, right? Because you're gonna be trying to rush it in and try and make it so that you're using as many off-the-shelf parts as possible, like I said. If you're building it for yourself, you're gonna be custom machining stuff and making mechanisms that are crazy that no one's seen before, right? That are like not productional, like you cannot manufacture that in quantity because it would be too cost prohibitive, Any sort of other ideas, like I don't know any crazy ideas, but just using really expensive like things, and by that I mean like a $10 fiber optics or something on ramps like what Tron did. That's expensive for a production machine, but for a home brewer, that's nothing, So, and it just gets crazier from there. Let me make sure we're good on time here. I don't want to run over. We got 3 minutes.
How hard is it to make like reliable like playfield toys?
How hard is it?
Like, do people just like buy, from another pinball machine, or like even Ben Heck pinball machines, like they don't have toys.
Yeah, it depends what you would like qualify a toy being too. It is hard to manufacture parts that can take a beating of a pinball machine over and over and over again and actually survive. But the good thing about homebrew is when you're building something for yourself, you can always take this to a show, have people play it and break it, see where it broke, rebuild it, fix the one part, make it beefier, make it so it doesn't break, and then see what breaks next. It's like, I don't know if anyone's into RC cars, but you're always breaking something, and then you're like, I'll replace that plastic piece with aluminum, and then the next thing down the line breaks. It's basic stuff, yeah, but it is tough to make stuff that is reliable. Those engineers at Stern and at JJP who make those crazy toys like that Godzilla thing, those go through a lot of testing, and I know they have those machines set up in test rigs, and they're running 24 hours a day, just seeing what's gonna break. It's really cool, actually. Yeah. Did you have a question as well?
Are there resources about like the general rule of thumbs for component placement and where you want the bells and where you want the ramps and stuff like that?
Not really. No, that is all up to you in your head. And I would recommend looking at what exists today and see if you could push the limit and see if you can come up with something in your head that you have not seen yet.
In your opinion, who's doing the best direct to playfield printing right now?
Direct to playfield printing is a company called Bader out of Wisconsin. They make Spookies playfields, American Pinballs playfields, and I don't know, a bunch of others. Yeah, not a bunch of others, just a couple others. I don't know who else they're making.
Do you see a good future for homebrewers on the P3?
Yeah, so I didn't talk about that at all. So the P3 platform, do you guys see that modular pinball machine out there? It has like an LCD instead
Heist.
of a playfield? Yeah, like Heist. Yeah. That is all open source, and people have been making homebrew games already on this platform where you don't even have to make anything physical. You can just start programming something new. There are people making custom homebrew like drop-in modules for it too, which is really cool.
It seems like skipping the best part.
It sounds like something, right?
Skipping the best part.
Yeah, I know. I know. The fun part is doing the mechanical thing and laying out the stuff. But it depends. There's a lot of people that just want to do software. Like they don't, like they're like, I can't build stuff. Like I'm not good at this. I want to just, go on. All right, I think we're probably over time here, guys. Sorry. All right, we are done. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you guys have more questions, you can find me after. Just